Look around. Over the last few days, nearly 2/3 of the population of the United States has been living under either a flood warning watch or a heat advisory. Temperatures in the Atlantic Ocean are the highest ever recorded. Wildfires are ravaging parts of Greece. A typhoon has forced tens of thousands of people from their homes in Beijing, and July is on track to be the hottest month in recorded history. Meanwhile, the latest report from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, is very clear and it is very foreboding. If the United States, China, and the rest of the world do not act extremely aggressively in cutting carbon emissions, our planet will face enormous and irreversible damage. Let me be clear about that last part. If the entire planet, led by the largest economies in the world, the United States and China, does not get its act together, the world that we will be leaving our children and future generations will be increasingly unhealthy and uninhabitable. What makes this issue so difficult and so complicated is that it is a crisis that no individual nation can solve alone for its own people. It is a global crisis. It is an issue that requires the cooperation of every nation on earth. Whether we like it or not, we are all in this together. Just one example. Despite the frightening impact of climate change on the United States, highly populated Asian countries are facing even worse challenges. Sea levels on China's coastline are rising more quickly than the global average. Major cities like Shanghai, Tianjin, and Shenzhen are all located along the Chinese coast and could face catastrophic flooding in years to come, creating havoc with the entire Chinese economy. There are projections that Shanghai, a city of 24 million people, could be underwater by the end of the century. Now, the bad news is that developing a mutually beneficial relationship with China to save the future of this planet will not be easy. Sadly, pathetically, there are hawks in both countries who are working hard to create a new Cold War. The good news is that we still have time, the United States, China, and other countries around the world, to make the decision to act aggressively in combating climate change and preventing irreparable damage to our country and the entire planet. While we must work diligently to foster international cooperation on climate change, we must also do something else. In the United States and around the world, we must ask a very simple question. How did we get here? How did we get to a place in time where the health and well-being of the entire planet and the lives of billions of people is under enormous threat? And the answer to that question is not complicated. The truth is that the scientific community for many decades has made it crystal clear that climate change and all the dangers it poses in terms of drought, floods, extreme weather disturbances, and disease is the result of carbon emissions from the fossil fuel industry. As far back as the late 1950s, over 60 years ago, physicist Edward Teller and other scientists were warning executives in the fossil fuel industry that carbon emissions were, quote, contaminating the atmosphere and causing a greenhouse effect that could eventually lead to temperature increases, quote, sufficient to melt the ice cap and submerge New York, end quote. That's what they were saying 60 years ago. In 1975, Shellback research concluded that increasing atmospheric carbon concentrations could cause global temperature increases that would drive, quote, major climatic changes, end quote. and compared the dangers of burning fossil fuels to nuclear waste. Beginning in the late 1970s, Exxon, now ExxonMobil, conducted extensive research on climate change that predicted current rising temperatures correctly and skillfully. The fossil fuel corporations knew. They knew they were causing global warming and therefore threatening the very existence of the planet. Yet, in pursuit of profit, fossil fuel executives not only refused to publicly acknowledge what they had learned, but year after year lied about the existential threat that climate change posed for our planet. So what happened to the CEOs who betrayed the American people and the global economy? Were they fired from their jobs? Were they condemned by pundits on cable television and the editorial boards of major newspapers? Were they prosecuted? Did they go to jail for their crimes? Nope, not at all, not on one of them. The reality is these CEOs simply got richer and richer. It is obscene. When a criminal walks into a store and shoots the clerk behind the counter, we make the moral judgment that this behavior is socially unacceptable and that gunman should be punished. When a public official misuses and steals taxpayer money, we make the moral judgment that that embezzler should lose his or her job and perhaps be incarcerated. Yet when fossil fuel executives make calculated decisions that are life-threatening to billions of people or to the entire planet, we are told that it's just business. No, 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 that is not acceptable. That is why earlier this week I sent a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland urging him to bring lawsuits against the fossil fuel industry for its long-standing and carefully coordinated campaign to mislead consumers and discredit climate science in pursuit of massive profits. That letter was co-signed by Senators Merkley, Warren, and Markey. Like the tobacco industry before him, the actions of ExxonMobil, Shell, and potentially other fossil fuel companies represent a clear violation of federal racketeering laws, truth in advertising laws, consumer protection laws, and potentially other laws. And the Department of Justice must act swiftly to hold these companies accountable for their unlawful actions. More than 40 states and municipalities have filed lawsuits that seek to hold the fossil fuel industry accountable for their illegal campaign of misinformation around the global crisis of climate change. The Department of Justice must join the fight and work with partners at the Federal Trade Commission and other law enforcement agencies to file suits against all those who participated in the fossil fuel industry's illegal conspiracy of lies and deception. The fossil fuel industry must begin to pay for the extraordinary damage they are causing. Climate change is an existential threat to every man, woman, and child on Earth. At every level, in every country, we must act boldly and aggressively to save the planet for our kids and future generations. Let us go forward together. Thank you.